Had another viewer question that I wanted to dig into today. I had someone that asked me about Salesforce and how they handle a contact and a person. And yes, those are different things. We're going to get into it today. Hey everyone, welcome to Salesforce for Recruiters. I'm your host, Brad Owens, and I was just like you. I was a recruiter who for well over a decade, and I was using various pieces of technology that never really fit what I wish they could do for me and my business. But then I saw Salesforce, and I went, where has this been all my life? It's absolutely the platform that we should be using as recruiters, and I'm here to teach you why. So today I want to dig into a question I got from one of my viewers, and it's going to be a little bit more technical conversation today than we typically get into, because what we're going to talk about today is more of a data model question inside of Salesforce. Now, inside of Salesforce, you have the ability to create a number of different objects. And objects are just types of things that you want to keep track of. So this could be contacts, this could be accounts, this could be leads, this could be opportunities, this could be invoices, all these types of things that you want to keep track of. And inside of Salesforce, when we're talking about an individual, you have the ability to keep track of these individuals in one of two different ways. You can use what's called a contact, or you can use a person. So what we're going to do today is dig into the difference between a contact and a person, when you might want to use one over the other, and maybe some of the benefits to each of those. To start off, let's dig into the differences between a contact and a person inside of Salesforce. So a contact, think of it in a business-to-business sense. We're always dealing with contacts that work at a particular place, and that place is their account. So inside of Salesforce, you have the ability to have a contact, and that contact, so Joe Smith, always has to be working at a specific account, so Acme. So because Joe is working at Acme, those two things are related together. So in Joe's entire history, he will always be aligned to Acme at some point. At some point, Joe may move jobs and move to, Omega. And at that point, Joe would now be working at the account Omega. So we're keeping track of Joe at all times, but Joe is always associated to a different account. Now, person account, on the other hand, is a little bit different. A person, I called it a person account because it's kind of what it is. A person is always a contact and an account together. Now, it's a little bit difficult, but if you don't really care who this person works for or what company they're associated with, you can set them up as a person inside of Salesforce. Now, this is a whole system-wide setting that you need to change, and there's a lot that goes into it. But at the foundation, if you don't really care what company this person is associated with, then they can be just a person inside Salesforce. So when would you want to use a person account? Well, a person account comes in handy when your business and what you're doing inside of Salesforce and what you're keeping track of doesn't really care about where this person currently works or what company they're associated with. So let's say, for example, you are, I just over the weekend went and bought something at a sporting goods store. Now, a sporting goods store does not care where I work. They just care that I'm a person who bought these specific things in the past, right? So they can market to me. They can send out specific things specifically directed to people that are interested in this particular type of product. The same thing happens when we're dealing with health systems. Health systems don't really care where individuals are working. They just care that they're keeping track of you and all your health-related issues or ailments or whatever it might be. So in those particular cases, we can use a person object inside of Salesforce. So the person object just gives you the ability to have an individual that's not associated with any particular type of organization or account. Now, they are technically both a contact and an account, but we're not going to get into that right now. Just understand that a person is just a individual that is not associated with a company. They're just an individual. So a contact object inside of Salesforce is an individual, but that individual always has to be associated to an account. So inside of Salesforce, I, Brad Owens, could be associated with Salesforce, the account, or I could be associated with Assemble, the account, or my old recruiting firm account. I could be associated to all these different accounts at some point in my journey inside of my Salesforce system. So you can understand why this would be incredibly beneficial to recruiters, because I can be a contact, and I could be a contact at some point at Acme and at Omega and at Salesforce and at Assemble and at all these other places. And at my journey throughout my relationship with my particular recruiting company could be associated to a number of different accounts. And that's why it's incredibly beneficial to recruiters to use the contact object and not the person object, because we're establishing this history of accounts that I've been associated with, or places that I've worked, or places that I've been a hiring manager, or places that I've been placed out at for an individual work assignment. So for a recruiter, a contact is a much more beneficial object model rather than using a person, because a person just boils it down to this one individual. But there's also some other benefits to contacts that we should probably get into, because a contact can also support a hierarchy. And when I mean hierarchy, I mean like I report to a certain individual. So we can start seeing who my manager is. And then if we look at their manager, you can start understanding that this hierarchy becomes incredibly important in recruiting, because we can start seeing an entire org chart of a place of business. So that's one reason that I like the contact object, because it gives you the ability to create these hierarchies inside of Salesforce. Contacts also give you the ability to take advantage of everything that's out there on the App Exchange. If you're a developer that's developing on top of the Salesforce ecosystem, you want to be able to play to the widest range of audience out there. And the best way to do that is to design your app for the contact object. If I were a texting application, or if I were a phone application, everything that I'd be designing my app to use would be the contact, because the contact is the most widely used object inside of Salesforce. That's what all of Salesforce's future releases are based on. They expect most individuals and most people to be using the contact object and not the person object, because the person object doesn't apply to as many business situations that Salesforce can develop for. So there's multiple different issues I see recruiting firms getting into when they don't use the contact object. Some of those are related to the way that you distinguish your contacts. So some recruiting firms have gone out there and they're developed their own object model where they have candidates sitting over here, they have clients sitting over here, and they think that's all well and good until they come up against that issue where one of their candidates then becomes a hiring manager at a client, or one of their clients gets fired and now they need to become a candidate. Now all of a sudden we have multiple different records representing the exact same individual inside of Salesforce. So all of that history that we have on this person is now spread between multiple different records. And to avoid that, what I see most people using is the contact object and using your relationships with different types of objects inside of Salesforce to define what type of contact that is. For example, defining me as a contact inside your system is much more beneficial when you start accounting for the relationships to the other objects in your system. I am not a candidate if I am at a client that we have a job for in our system. So you can very easily tell if I'm off limits because I'm associated to the account of one of the people where we have either an open job or we've created a placement in the past year, however you want to define it. But my relationship is what defines me as a contact. It's not that I am just this one type of thing. I am never just a candidate or just a client. I can be both. And the easiest way to do that is to use your definitions of your relationships inside Salesforce to help define that type of contact. Another problem that I see recruiting firms getting into when they use contacts versus the person account is their question for me is always, well, what do we do with all of these people that are unemployed? Or what do we do with all these mass amount of applications that have applied and we don't have an account tied to that individual? Why wouldn't we just make them person objects inside of Salesforce so we don't have to deal with that? Well, you're solving one problem but creating another. So the best possible way that I've seen recruiting firms get around the person account and still being able to use that contact object is to use pool accounts. So when I was setting up my initial applicant tracking system inside of Salesforce, every time a contact was unemployed, I'd assign them to the unemployed account, because now I know that this person at this point in time is unemployed. When I get them a job, they're associated to a new account, and now they'll be at an actual account that I have placed them at. Whereas all of these multiple people applying to jobs, if my resume parser doesn't have an account that it can tie this individual to, we typically see recruiting firms getting the most out of their software when they apply that person to a candidate pool account. So this candidate has been applied to a candidate pool so that when they get mass imported into my applicant tracking system from those thousands of applications I got overnight, I don't crowd up my system with all these different random people at random accounts that may not have been matched up to something already in my system. I can just put them in kind of this holding tank of a candidate pool account. So that's why I typically use pool accounts when I'm dealing with contacts inside Salesforce. I have typically an unemployed pool, and then I have a candidate pool. So I hope that gives you a little bit of context as to the difference between a contact and a person account inside of Salesforce. As you can tell, this can get incredibly technical and we can go incredibly deep on this, but I just wanted to hit the highlights here. So at a minimum, here's what you need to understand. A contact is an individual inside Salesforce that has to be associated with an account. A person is an individual inside Salesforce that does not have to be associated with an account. They technically are both a contact and an account themselves, and that's the person object. But that person object comes with a number of different limitations. Things like reporting to be awfully difficult, you have no hierarchies that are supported with contacts, and contacts are just a better way to build your system inside Salesforce to be future-proof. So I typically always would recommend that you use the contact object and not the person object when you're doing ATSs inside Salesforce. Now, what ATS should you use when you're creating something inside of Salesforce? I highly recommend the Assemble applicant tracking system. I realize that I'm associated with them, but there's a reason for that. I've been in this game a long time, and the Assemble applicant tracking system is by far the easiest and the most flexible for you to use inside Salesforce. If you want to find out more, it's at assemble.com. It's ASYMBL.com. If you like this kind of content and are curious about more recruiting inside Salesforce, there's plenty more at salesforceforrecruiters.com. If you have questions that you'd like me to answer, case in point, this episode came directly from one of these questions that I got from one of my viewers. You can email those questions in to hello@bradowens.com. I'm happy to answer those for you. But that's all I have for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you'd like to see more, I hope to see you on the next episode of Salesforce for Recruiters. Bye.